welcome to another episode of the Insilico Terminal podcast. Today, my guest is Luxury, and I like to ask people at the beginning to introduce themselves to the audience. So, who are you? What do you do? How
Hello.
do you describe yourself?
Well, I'm a full-time day trader. I say day trader, but just full-time trader. Also at Exo Charts, but primarily just a trader, day in day out. That is who I am since
hmm
2018. So yeah.
How did you get into trading?
My friend introduced me at the time, just to look at Bitcoin, and I think everyone gets into that maybe I don't know. I had that one friend that really got me involved at the time. They're not interested anymore at
hmm
all. Well, not interested at all, but they're just not trading it day in day out like they were in the beginning.
hmm
And then it was like the descending triangle times. I
hmm
think if you ever see the chart, whatever, Bitcoin 2018, you have this like triangle. It then goes from like 6K to 3K.
Yeah.
Um, and my friends at that point are kind of they're out. Bitcoin's very quiet. It's not very entertaining at all.
hmm
But you know that is where I actually made, I that was my first kind of big trade, was really 6K to 3K. um but I would really put that down to more luck than having an actual framework or system in place at the time.
hmm
And I think, I don't know how it is for others, but I feel luck in the very early stages has a role, because I know some of my friends at the time, they got liquidated in that moment. Some people get liquidated tons of times, whatever, and
hmm
they completely, stopped trading from that point onwards. I didn't get liquidated, but had I have got liquidated, maybe my outlook and future from that point, especially when it's so early on, would have completely changed.
hmm
But then again, you have to be resilient in this game, and I feel like you're going to go over massive hurdles and bumps along the way anyway. So take it as you will from that point on. But yeah, got the massive win from 2018, and yeah, again, beyond that point, really accrued quite a few losses, obviously, before
hmm
then starting to hit the ground rolling. And I think those losses where I then started to pick up on having a system, building a trading plan, journaling, and so on and so forth. So yeah, that's how I kind of started back in 2018.
hmm What kept you interested while the price was going down? Like, were you immediately interested in the trading part? Did you have any like
Um,
financial background or anything like that?
so I was actually an accountant at the time.
hmm
I say accountant. I was training to be an accountant, but it was quite a nice role. And I think actually, it's interesting to talk upon this, because I went through. I was an accountant for obviously that period of time, and I really disliked what I was doing,
hmm
like really badly. And it took some courage to go against the grain at the time. When I say against the grain, I mean really like against family, because at the
Yeah.
time I'm really young, and everyone then is kind of viewing like the accounting role I had was, I was in central London. It was like I was the goat essentially, but in my head I
hmm
wasn't. I really hated it. Um, so that I didn't have a financial background to speak, but I was in accounting. I just hated it so badly, and I had to make trading work. So it wasn't a matter of kind of, back to your thing, staying interested. It was like either I find a way to make this trading thing work, or I do this thing that I hate. Now,
I see.
luckily, yeah, I mean, luckily at the time, I didn't have. It wasn't like a financial thing in terms of I had to make money, but it was more so like a career thing, is to say, like, what do I want to do for the next 10, 15, 20 years,
hmm
or so on and so forth. And I know it wasn't going to be, um, accounting. And so I had to find an alternative, and I thought it had to be this. So I just really stuck my head down like this, and, problem solved. And I
hmm
guess, still to this day, I'm problem solving. So yeah, that's how I tried to stay entertained. It wasn't like staying entertained. It was like I had to make this work somehow. And it was
hmm
more just resilience, I would say.
How did you conceptualize that trading could be something that could be your career for like the next 5, 10, 15 years or something? I think you're pretty, like, I'm a huge fan of your videos. Like, I've watched a lot of them, and heard you talk about
Thanks.
that before. And like on CT, I feel like, or if you get first into crypto, it's not really a common thing to think of it as a career path for like the next years of your life. So how did you get into that?
Uh, really interesting, yeah, because like on CT, it's more looking for not moonshots necessarily, but 10 10 15 20x on your money, which is definitely
Yeah.
doable. It's more so just the route of I think it was Tom Dante, SMB Capital, Lance, those type of people who kind of, although they don't trade crypto day in day out, kind of just bringing over their core principles to what I trade, which is Bitcoin.
Hmm.
And they've been doing it for building it into a career in that sense, and like just adjusting my brain to actually what good returns or sustainable returns should look like, both in the sense of like R multiple over the course of a year, drawdown, that type of mentality just wasn't applied generally when you look throughout the CT space, and then, even to this day, so when you think of it like that, it brings more of the long term into it, because if I'm saying I'm going to make 40 to 60 to 40 to 60% a year, just for an example, right?
Hmm.
That is not something that's gonna, I'm not gonna make money with that in a year and then retire. It has to be something that you do for years and years and years before you see like really exponential growth at that stage. And yeah, that's kind of where it comes from, is just having that long term outlook. And I mean, I really enjoy what I do, so it's like I
Hmm.
want to do this kind of for a long time, and I don't see it stopping. um so yeah, that's kind of the outlook. And I think, I don't know, people, when you have these short term outlook on things, you can be very sporadic in your decision making, I found as well.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, it's interesting. I mean, that's kind of my take on that.
So after 2018 and going more into
Yes.
trading, did you already start trading full time back then, or?
No. So what really happened was, it was around 2018. I had a down period, and I had to kind of make, I think it was in 2019, like early 2019, like January, maybe Christmas time of
Hmm.
2018, where it was kind of like, you know, I had savings. Do I go for this now, or not kind of go for it,
Hmm.
um, and see where it takes me? Because luckily, and I'll say this with great emphasis, I understand there's a lot of people that now speak to me and try to get into trading when obviously they have family, kids, etc. And I don't want to speak from a place where I had zero experience from that point.
Hmm.
I was just lucky enough. Especially my mom at the time, she really said to me, just go for it. There was no real financial stress. I had money saved from the job at the time.
Yeah.
I was young. I didn't pay any rent or anything even at the time. It was just kind of go for it, take the risk. And I'm really grateful for that in terms of my family. So obviously that happened. I mean, some were doubtful of, the whole, what are you doing online? But gratefully my parents, direct parents weren't, mum and dad. So I went from that point onwards, and I said, okay, kind of, can I swear on this? I mean, fuck it, I kind of was like, let's leave it,
Hmm.
and let's go for this. So I had I would say the first 3 months were very rough, but even from that point, just having the long term outlook, I was very conservative on risk management, because I still, even though I didn't have financial responsibilities, I just guess my brain was kind of very sensible in the sense I didn't want to blow the pot or anything by any sense. And my pot wasn't that big.
Yeah.
I think it was around, a couple $1,000s at the time. I still didn't want to blow that. So
Hmm.
that's where the risk management comes into play. And then conservatively building from that point on. And, you know, gratefully, I'm in a very, I'd like to say, nice position now. But it's interesting, obviously I still took big losses along the way, but,
Hmm.
before I had, before I really went for it. But when I went for it is kind of when I said I need to start really applying a diligent risk management approach to this in great detail. So yeah.
What did your trading look like back then, like strategy wise or execution wise, and how
uh,
is it compared to today?
oh, so I mean, back then, I mean, if we're talking very early on, it was just luck. I mean, you would pattern
Hmm.
trade. Uh, Nothing wrong with pattern trading, by the way. I want to get that also out there. Just there was zero structure or system around it. I think that's the biggest difference from today, is that I had zero structure in the sense of like I'd place a, I wouldn't even place a stop. You just watch the chart. You'd go bed with no stop. That's kind of how I was in the. I'd go bed no stop. Someday it'd be good, someday bad. And
Yeah.
That was the biggest change. There was no
Mhm.
plan going into the day. He was very sporadic, and I think most people experienced that as well. It's just horrible, to be honest. So
Mhm.
that, I think, the biggest change, more than, when you look at the actual core principles, the biggest change is definitely just the way I'm actually planning for the day. I'm sorry, the way I'm actually planning for the day, instead of like
Mhm.
the actual trading itself, and preparing and journaling, etc. That's kind of what I would say there. you know so there's that. But nowadays, obviously, when I I wake up, I've got my routine, and I think most people really overlook the idea of just having a plan, or like,
Mhm.
spending days, weeks building out some sort of system in which, they're willing to actually develop and follow over time. I think that's also really mislooked, is just, spending that time. And I never did that in the beginning.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think that's the biggest change.
But I think like strategy wise, you're mostly day trading Bitcoin nowadays, right?
Yes, yes. So good. Okay, so yeah, that's really actually interesting to bring up. I forgot to mention that. So in the beginning, I still only mainly traded Bitcoin. I mean, I would have had a few ETH, and actually, I you know I would have punted a few alts here and there, randomly in
Mhm.
the beginning. If we're talking very early on, but my main focus was still Bitcoin. And then as it developed, it was just okay. Now it's really solely Bitcoin. Moving forward, understanding that market inside and out. Um, do I think it's a bad thing, by the way, to trade many coins? Not at all. I don't think that's the
Mhm.
case at all. What I do think is that if you're going to do that, you should have some sort of plan, or, you know, at the very least, a plan or structure as to how you choose what you're going to trade and when you're going to trade, rather than just looking at what's up, what's down, and going for it. In my opinion, I mean, you
Mhm.
can do that, but have a system around the way you've done that. Because if you don't have a system, it makes it extremely hard to review if you're just eyeballing stuff randomly, I feel.
Mhm.
So have some sort of planning around it, and then, from that point on, you can actually adjust it. Otherwise, yeah, it can be it can be very tough, if you have got no planning around it.
So is the reason that you only decide to trade Bitcoin that it's easier to build a system around that than
Well,
watching multiple coins at once?
I think so. I mean, in the beginning, it was because I wanted to focus on one coin. And then that was like, okay, I wanted to focus on one thing, Bitcoin. And then it was like, okay, 6 months in, I've really understood Bitcoin to a decent extent at the moment.
Mhm.
I personally feel in the way I trade, I need to understand something rather decently well before I start putting money there. Um, and I think people will also agree with the sense. I don't know. I've been trading Bitcoin a long, long time, just Bitcoin day in, day out. Like, I don't think there's been a day, even if it means a couple minutes at the very least, if there's been a day in the last 7 years where I haven't checked the Bitcoin chart, you
Mhm.
know, and some days it's multiple hours, some days it's a couple minutes, most days it's actually hours on end. And I think that in itself, it trains your brain heavily, into that asset itself. So I feel like I'd have to do it with another asset, whether it be hype, whatever it may be, ETH to some extent,
Mhm.
before I start putting money there. But more importantly than that kind of sense, I still would want to build and lay out a system there, and it has to make financial sense, to do that. I have to
Mhm.
know that I have an edge there, um, before I actually do that. Before I start putting money there, and that takes time, serious time, to build a plan out as to when I'm gonna, and when am I gonna trade one asset over another? When am I gonna trade both together? When am I gonna trade
Mhm.
one over the other? That's gonna take serious time to do. You know,
Yeah.
so I think people just overlook that type of thing. Um, really dive deep into what I feel is necessary to make money, because I just don't want to be losing money for the sake of losing money.
Mhm.
So yeah.
I'm curious since I think very few people only trade one coin, or very few people that I'm aware of at least only trade
Hmm.
one single market. How would you say has Bitcoin changed over the years now? Because back then it was like dominated mostly by centralized exchanges, I guess, and now we
Yeah.
also have ETF flows, and then CME maybe has more importance,
Ye-
options, and
Yeah.
hyperliquid.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I personally trade on Hyperliquid. Just I'll say that, but it's a very good point that Bitcoin is extremely fragmented in comparison to how it was back then.
Mm-hmm.
Um, back then it was definitely more like you could look at one exchange or like two exchanges and like you get a good sense of the readings.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's more, I guess you have to aggregate like a decent amount more, if anything. But also like nowadays, I mean, when I'm looking at flow, and I'm sure we'll discuss order flow, etc. later on as well in a bit more
Mm-hmm.
detail. Um, I'm not pinpointing direct figures like I used to before. Now, what I mean by that is, let's say, for example, I'm looking at Bitcoin at a high or a low in the day. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not going to look at one exchange necessarily and go, I want to see 15 million longs at the top. It's more of like a generalized aggregated flow type of view instead of
Mm-hmm.
pinpointing direct figures, because that's very hard to do, especially with how Bitcoin is very fragmented nowadays, you see. So that's what I would say there. I would also say that Bitcoin, in terms of how it's changed, I mean, it used to, especially on lower time frames, this is just my personal opinion, like it used to swing failure pattern a lot more than it does
Mm-hmm.
now. I mean, in terms of just very basic wick above, close below, like, and that would be like massive fuel for a reversal. But I feel like that is definitely changed nowadays to more fake outs. Still, you're getting these spikes in general, like for meme reversion plays. Um, but overall, it's definitely like more move below, for example, and then come back above, like after a little bit of time, like failed auctions, etc. Then it
Mm-hmm.
is like this one wick and then the SFP. If anything, when I see a swing failure pattern, I'm actually looking for it to fill the wick, for example, of the swing failure pattern. So that's definitely something that's changed. I mean, that's probably like since 2021, I would say,
Mm-hmm.
2021 to now. I mean, time flies. We're almost 2026. It's 4 or
Yeah.
5 years, and that's been the change there. So that's how I'd say Bitcoin's changed. But I think it's definitely the biggest factor is not pinpointing direct figures directly like I would on if I was going to have a day trade, scalp, NQ, ES, etc.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely not like that. I think they're very different in that sense because you have to aggregate flows,
Yeah.
look at different things. I mean, I did say as well, I did miss out, but I do trade on Hyperliquid. So I don't know. Do you
Mm-hmm.
trade on? Are you also trading on? What are you trading on? I should probably ask that as well.
Personally trade on mostly on Hyperliquid.
Yeah.
I do like different kinds. I've like started to do a bit more longer term swing trading lately,
Hmm.
and I'm doing that on Hyperliquid. But I also mainly what I've been doing most of the time is scalping. Um, Usually on Bybit, but I've also recently started using more of the perps exchanges to farm a bit of points.
Oh, I know. Extended.
Um, yeah, basically, like
Yeah.
I mean, I'm using many. Like I've used lighter,
Oh wow.
extended,
Oh
edge,
nice.
X, variational, and now nano. I think that's the Kraken
Yeah.
one.
That's
I don't know
interesting. And
how much I'm going to speak on them as a terminal maxi
oh, okay.
on their
Okay.
experience, but
Yes. No, it's
yeah.
interesting. I mean, even just very, very, very briefly touching on just how, in my experience, I was also heavily on Bybit at one point, Binance. Slowly switching over to Dexes personally,
Hmm.
and I'm not one to just go with, I guess, general consensus. I found the experience to be better, like personally,
Hmm.
um, just from every month on a centralized place, I'm always gonna get something, limits here, limits there. I've never
Yeah.
experienced that with like Hyperliquid, etc. or anything. So it's
Yeah.
like that's why I prefer that from just my own trading experience. So yeah, we'll see how that space evolves, but also Hyperliquid got some interesting flows. So
Hmm.
looking at open interest and stuff there, I like doing that too. And comparing that to the centralized places like Bybit
Hmm.
and Binance. I think you also have to look at the entities that not entities, but like the types of traders that are going to be trading on Hyperliquid versus other exchanges. I am assuming that Hyperliquid is going to have, they're going to have you have to know what you're doing to first of all get on there, but that doesn't mean
Hmm.
you're going to be a good trader necessarily. Maybe Binance is full of more algos, so is Bybit. Potentially. Bybit still I feel a bit more retail, but
Hmm.
those types of groups of traders can influence how you trade it. I feel like if I see a increase in open interest or increase in flows from Bybit or Hyperliquid, I'm much more in kind of what's the word inclined to look to mean revert it if they get trapped. I
Hmm.
feel like it's more painful than if I see open interest increase on Binance. I could be wrong.
Yeah.
That's just how I've looked at it and monitored it over the time. So yeah.
So do you take like any TradFi or options data into account at all?
Uh,
Or
Good question. And no, I don't. I'm looking for when there are news events. So when you get CPI, etc. Like I note down the figures. I'm monitoring that when they're coming in, how they're going to come into play into my plan. But them themselves, like the actual news events and the news info and whatever, have zero impact on the way I trade the market.
Mhm.
Which some may view as weird, but I've built my system around, kind of what draws what causes the market to move, greed, behavioral inefficiencies. That's kind of what I'm driving my decisions off of, and like using that, behavioral inefficiencies, meaning looking for trap traders, offside positioning, and kind of going against that flow once they are caught offside. How do I quantify them being offside again? And that type of information is how I'm really capturing my trades, and then using that with data,
Mhm.
that I've collected and continue to forward collect and test. That is how kind of I feel my trading, and just problem solving in general. I think some of it comes with like just trying to think of unique ideas, um, like just thinking differently. Um, like I think most people, just as an example, most people will come into this space for an example, and they'll be like, "What are the times for the day?" At times in terms of like session times, Asia,
Mhm.
London, New York, whatever it may be. And my brain went like that. Okay, what are the times? But why are they set like that? Um,
Mhm.
so that's perfectly fine. So I went and okay, why are they set like that? And you reverse engineer. So I started going, okay, what's the median volume on average? Per hour, per 15-minute bucket per day.
Mhm.
What are the peaks and troughs of those to come up with like the best session times? Do they just align perfectly with what's already viewed as the norm, or are they slightly different? So that's why I use actually slightly different session times to what people would view as the norm, so to speak. um, doesn't mean they're better, they just fit the way I trade, because I'm looking for those spikes in volatility and whatever it may be, um, in those manners. So yeah, that's what I would say, just thinking a bit
Mhm.
differently there.
Since you are so specialized, do you have like a view on Bitcoin in the future as an asset and also as a tradable asset?
um that's a very good point. Do I have a view on it, as in terms of like my view on Bitcoin? In the beginning, it's very interesting because I got introduced to Bitcoin not as like kind of this digital gold, but just like this thing to trade. And like
Yeah.
I was very much separated, even still to this day a bit, as to, it's just something I trade. I don't care
Mhm.
whether it goes up or down, whatever. But and I still don't to an extent now, but still, I feel as you gather wealth, you start thinking, where do you want to be placing your money long term? Where
Mhm.
do you feel like this asset's going to be in the next 10, 20 years? Um, Historically, it's gone up. You know, I'm not going to bet against it going up long term.
Mhm.
And I think that's the way I like to play that. Um, does that mean I'm going to put all my eggs in Bitcoin's basket? No. But I do feel, even, as long as my edge is there, and I think this is also important, do I view it as like something tradable in the distant future? Um, Only time will tell. I think, my edge is there at the moment. I
Mhm.
think, the way I'm going to plan for it is, my journal will tell me when my edge is eroding. As simple as it can be. I will
Mhm.
know after 10, 15, 20, maybe not, maybe a bit more than that, quite a few trades, how, is my edge eroding? If it is, let's take a step back and, you know re-evolve everything to some extent, and sit down and do that. I think that's also a big problem in the space, is that it's not advertised enough to kind of take a step back and review whether you actually have an edge or not.
Mhm.
Because I think people will just continuously endlessly trade. But if I realize through my journal over the course, because I have these systems in place where I'm doing like weekly, quarterly reviews, again thanks to Tom Dante, SMB, all those guys for this, you know I'll go, you know doing all my routines, and at the end of it, after like 2-3 months, I'll be able to tell myself, okay, my edge is eroding a bit here. I'm willing to take a step back for like a month or two just to really sit down
Mhm.
and wonder what's going on. I think people are a bit too afraid to sit down or sit out the market for that long. I think people are
Mhm.
afraid to sit down at the market for a day, let alone a month or two. So getting your brain comfortable with that is also, something there. So back to your question of like, do I think it's going to be tradable back then? I don't know. In 3 years, it might. not be tradable for me. It's just really how does my edge develop across those years. I think
Mhm.
that's what's most important.
Could you ever see yourself trading any other markets, like
Yes.
stocks or FX or?
Yeah, I think definitely. I mean, NQ or ES. I think those two are the ones that probably NQ, if any. But I haven't had the chance to dabble into it yet,
Mhm.
only because I feel my edge is there at the moment on Bitcoin, and we'll talk about R multiple and stuff in a bit. But my edge is there at the moment, so I feel like there's no necessary need to divert my attention there. Interesting enough, I mean, I don't want to say I know there's you know trade XYZ and all these different places to trade that I've actually been taking a look at, XYZ
Mhm.
100, whatever. That's quite interesting to me. I just like because I like that user experience. It's caught my eye,
Yeah,
but
me too.
still,
Yeah.
you know, and it could become deeper liquidity, moving forward. So that's something of interest, but nothing that I've taken any action on yet. Again,
I see.
I'm quite methodical in the process that I got to sit down and really think about this if I'm going to trade it, and there's got to go a lot of time and planning into that. I can't just go one day I'm going to go trade, XYZ 100 or NQ or ES and let's go for it. And it's going to be
Mhm.
like you'll probably hear me talking about it for months before, or weeks at the very least, before I do anything there. Um, so that's important. Yeah, I'll leave that
I'm
there.
interested what the process would look like see when you would see that your edge is eroding. Like if you look at your journal and then you maybe see your win rate is decreasing, and then would you just step back, as you said, and like reevaluate what you're doing, or maybe like that the market regime is not the correct one
Yeah,
for your
I
current
mean,
strategy, or?
I think that's it's really important as to. I've always found it the hardest in the very early stages to stick to the plan,
Mhm.
because if I can only tell if my edge is eroding if I've been sticking to the plan. I think that's a really big factor to this all, because is my win rate dropping because my edge is eroding, or is it eroding because I'm not sticking to the, is my win rate dropping because I'm not sticking to the plan?
Mhm.
Um, and they're two very different things. Um, so the process would be, what would I do if I saw my win rate starting to drop? And also, it has to be over a sustained period of time. You know, I'm not going to be the one to take 3 losing trades in a row and go, oh my god, I need to change everything. That's not going to
Mhm.
happen. It's a sustained period of, like I have the numbers written down. I believe it's something like 10 to 15 are. I'm really seriously evaluating what I'm doing if I ever get to
Mhm.
that phase, because I think you have to be willing to experience drawdown. So yeah, 10 to 15 are. I think that I have a direct figure that I calculated. Let's just say 15 are. If I'm down that much, I'm stepping back, and I'm evaluating whether it be the fact that my edge is eroding because it's just no longer, the edge is eroding and I'm sticking to my plan, or it's
Mhm.
eroding and I'm not sticking to my plan. I'd probably rather it erode and I'm not sticking to the plan, um, because I know it's very easy to identify that, I'm not sticking to the plan.
Mhm.
Um, I need to, that would help the situation. If I was sticking to the plan and I'm hitting 15R drawdown, just as an example, then it requires a different level of thought, in the sense that, kind of less fine comb kind of through my journal. Let's highlight all losing trades to begin with. Okay, let's highlight the biggest losing trades and why are they sticking out? Why are they there? Um, and what's the market regime been over those periods of time? So like tons of questions are being asked, and then at that point, I'd probably then go, okay, let me rework my written plan, because I don't know if I've shown it anywhere. I mean, I show certain people I talk with individually, but I have a
Mhm.
really, really detailed plan and like system that is there, and I have it in writing and I have it laid out, and I can just go pick a certain aspect of it, change it, test it, and come back in a few weeks, whatever, and see has the edge changed, what's happened in the trading, how has that taken effect. So that's kind of the way I've been going about that. I would go about that if I'm honest. In terms of like if I was losing, chop change a bit, but it's also really dependent on how you're losing. So
Mhm.
That's what I would say there.
How do you manage to stay so disciplined within the system? Because I've seen you talk about it a lot before as well,
Hmm.
and I really find it impressive how like extensive and rigorous it is. But I think like very very few people actually have their system like written down in that way, and
Hmm.
then also execute it over such a long time
Period of
period,
time.
especially as a day trader. What
Yeah.
makes you like so disciplined in that regard? Or what helped you to
Uh,
become that way?
if I don't stick to it, there's no point in doing it. There's literally no point in me being at the chart. I mean, that's part of it.
Hmm.
Um, the other part of it, I think, is that people can't stick to something because they have zero conviction around it, and I gain conviction through data.
Hmm.
If I mean, I that's personally how I gain conviction through data. If I've gone and tested something, over the course of 3 months, I've gone on a testing period, and I go, okay, this has been working over the last 3 months. I'm going to continue doing that. I've got the data that supports it, so I'm like much more likely to stick with it than
Hmm.
like try and divert. Because look, I'm not gonna. I don't want to sound harsh, but if you're diverting from your plan randomly, then it's like
Hmm.
you're really kind of trying to punt, and like it's like your desperation is kicking in. Almost like if
Yeah.
I'm diverting from my plan, like I must be desperate for a win or something's going on there for that to happen.
Hmm.
Um, so you know, conviction, and create conviction through data, and ultimately, it's, I hear tons of people, talk about this, but just if I'm not following it, I might as well not be in this business, like at
Yeah.
all, because I just, I'm trading something that doesn't have an edge at that point, or at the very least, gambling, you know. So,
So way that you gain a conviction is by documenting everything as well. And
oh
I
yeah,
think like we can talk a bit about order flow, which is like your area of expertise, I would say.
yeah,
Or I can personally say I learned a bunch of order flow things, not like exclusively from you, but
hmm,
definitely through your educational content as well. So
thanks.
maybe you can talk a bit about that.
Yes, um, order flow in trading, it's interesting. I think people think it's going to be the holy grail. I think they just go, let's get into order flow, let's get into footprint, let's
Hmm.
get into whatever it may be. This is the holy grail. It's going to tell me exactly what's going to happen. That is not the case. Sorry to burn it there. I mean, at least from my experience, it's definitely not the case. It just gives you more variables to use to test with. You know,
Hmm.
um, I think that's the best way to put it. Really, if I'm trading just using the candles, and this is there, you don't need to use order flow. It's nice, and I'll talk about this in a second. But let's say I have a candlestick chart. I have an open, a
Hmm.
high, low, close, and I have time frames. Those are your variables, right? Your candles and your time frames, and your volume bars, maybe from trading view, whatever. Now, if you implement order flow into it, you have open interest, you have tick sizes, you have delta clusters, you have filters, you have all these different parameters that you can mess with. But ultimately, it's just how do you incorporate it into your plan. You don't
Hmm.
need order flow, but let's say you have trading view candlesticks, you can use that to build a plan, for example. But when you have order flow, you can obviously incorporate other details that I feel are really connected to, for example, the core foundations of how you exploit the market, in the sense of behavioral greed and inefficiencies, in the sense
Hmm.
that behavioral inefficiencies, right, are people getting caught offside. It's harder to see that through regular candlesticks than it is through order flow. Through order flow,
Yeah.
I can see where are new positions actually opening. How can I use that to build a system? How can I look to fade that, for an example? So I've added more variables in there, but they're necessary to help me, exploit the underlying foundations of it all.
Hmm.
I think that's the biggest thing. I think the biggest thing I can say is like understand what you're trying to exploit or capture. Momentum. Maybe you're trying to capture momentum. How does that look? What are you trying to capture in momentum? Right. You're trying to trade with people that are on side.
Hmm.
Break it down to its really core market microstructure fundamentals. There. Okay, you're trying to trade with people that are on side. That involves identifying at what point are people on side, for example, for a trade. And you can only really do that through order flow. Like, at least it's not really viable through candlesticks, in my opinion. you
Hmm.
know um, so that's what I'd say with order flow. I understand the underlying reason you're trying to, or underlying method to try and exploit the market, and then use order flow to build a system that helps you do that. I think that's the best way to put it. And let me know if you think I've missed something there. But
No, I think that's a good explanation. I'm curious, how long did it take you to really feel like you master that area,
mm,
or like
I
be?
s-
I don't know if you feel like that, but like at least you feel like you can
uh
teach people, and I think you're doing well
yeah,
at that. So.
I feel like I understand the mechanics of it all at the moment, but you're always learning. I'm still learning. It's more so learning how to incorporate different things into my system.
Mhm.
Like, funding rates are important. I'm looking at the moment, I'm spending time trying to build that into my system if it's necessary, looking at that,
Mhm.
how would that implement it all. Um, how long did it take me? It took, to get a good grasp on it, it takes, what it takes, you have to find it interesting. I mean,
Mhm.
I found that you have to find it interesting. Like, I really, um, I just had a love for order flow. I know it sounds weird,
Yeah.
whatever. I just,
No, I get it.
I,
Actually, I get it.
you enjoyed looking at the charts like that. You enjoyed seeing people getting liquidated or this
Mhm.
happening. And then you're really diving into, like, how does that work? You know, left side market sells, right side market buys. Okay, on the footprint. What does that mean in the sense of order flow? So it didn't take me, I'd say it took me a year. Well,
Mhm.
no, to get like a really good understanding, like, it probably took me 3-4 years,
Mhm.
like, to get like really, really, probably to this point now. Yeah, it took me like 4 or 5 years, and then it kind of slowly plateaus to some extent as to, like, what you need to understand, and also just how you're implementing it. Um, so there's that. I would say, yeah, it takes some time, but you just have to want to do it. I
Yeah.
think that's the biggest key. Like, if you're just trying to do it to make money, that's something else. But I think you have to really want to understand it and learn it. And there's tons of resources out there,
Mhm.
about it. So that's what I would say there.
No, I can definitely relate to that. I remember years ago, I always used to look at the charts that Trip was posting, and I was just so kind of like
Hmm.
mesmerized by them. And I also just like really enjoy, as you said, looking at it. And at the beginning, I obviously didn't really understand what was going on, but it just feels. I mean, with trading, you can pretty much do whatever you want, and if it works for you, then it works for you. But
Yeah,
for me, like when people just post charts and then post like trend lines or support resistance or whatever, that always just seemed a bit arbitrary to me, or never really like intuitively easy to understand. And with autoflow, I feel like there's a lot more logic to it, which it makes it
yeah,
feel like better as a tool for me to use personally, because it's like easier to build conviction off of something where I feel like there is a logic to it, and it's just not just like
yeah,
astrology for man that I'm convincing myself of.
yeah, yeah. No, exactly. I think that's the best way to look at it. Is like, it makes sense to you. I think, when you see people longing or shorting a specific level, like, directly in the sense of, like, open interest and that type of data, like, that's not
Mhm.
something you see through trend lines maybe as easily, or as clearly. So definitely, that's what it was for me.
What is your role at Exo Charts?
So
Working
I'm
with
the
them,
lead in,
right?
like, direction. So, like, I'm not a developer of any standards. I'm just the lead
Hmm.
there in the sense of the direction the product's taking, the new features that are getting implemented,
I see.
and that's kind of my role there. So yeah.
How did you get working with them? How long have you been with them?
Oh, I've been there for, I would say, I think it's been at least 4 years now, maybe
Hmm.
5. Quite a while. And then you have Varan, who's the lead, well, the actual head developer there, and the founder, and he brought me in, and yeah, we have a great working relationship, I would say.
Hmm.
Every day communicating on what needs to be done, what should be done, how we're going to add this, testing that. um, it's a different area for me because I was just a massive user of the product,
Hmm.
and it then evolved into that type of working role. And I think the biggest thing, it was just like, testing different things is not my expertise. My job full time is day trading. 95% of my income is through trading.
Mm-hmm.
And just testing a product is something very different to me. So that's something I'm still trying to work on now. Is like, again, my trading is kind of bringing over to Exo Charts because I'm implementing a system to actually test the software itself. And, that is how my kind of day to day looks. Sometimes I'll be testing, he'll be developing, I'll be incorporating different features, whatever it may be. So that's how it is there.
I see.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan, obviously, of Exo Charts because I just enjoy looking at it, and I guess it's also a bit similar with me and the terminal. I've also, before I started working here, been a long-term user and
It's
fan
awesome.
and enjoyer, and I'm very glad that I can now also be a contributor in some way.
Yeah. The terminal is awesome. I have if you check my channel, I have an older video. Not
Mm-hmm.
I say older. I don't know. It might have been a year or two old, where I'm covering like how I'm using the terminal. I use
Yeah.
terminal at the moment daily, day in day out. It's I would say there's two products where I know like the back of my hand, like Exo Charts and Insilico. I would say the
Mm-hmm.
terminal. Those two I know like extremely well. Just through again wanting to get the best out of both of them. So yeah, I'm using terminal day in day out.
Mm-hmm.
Again, you obviously got hyperliquid, that integration's there. It's seamless, I would say. So there's a lot of use case. Maybe I'll do an updated video on terminal as well,
Mm-hmm.
because again, there's new use cases and everything's been new since I've done that last video. But a lot of the things still apply then I would say now. So yeah, that would be interesting to do a new video on them and discuss that again. But yeah, terminal's awesome. I personally recommend people to use it. Why not?
Have you ever been have you always been aware of like the importance of execution in your trading, or is that something that is like that you've discovered throughout the
Um,
years?
I would say I discovered out the I hate the exchange UIs.
Mm-hmm.
In general, they're awful.
Me too.
In general, they're awful. Now,
Yeah.
I'll talk about it a bit more, but I think there is this consensus, slight shift from people that I've spoken to, that I think they care about the wrong things slightly in sense of their execution.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think people are okay. So I'll give you the biggest example of this. I was going to discuss in the video, but we'll discuss it here. I think, for example, people want to use limit chase a lot, which is
Mm-hmm.
perfectly fine. I use limit chase on occasion too. However, if you go back and look through your trades and your journal, right, limit chase is causing me to pay up. I'm just talking from how I viewed this. Limit chase is causing
Mm-hmm.
me to pay up every time I'm using it. Essentially, that's his job. By the way, is to cause you to pay up. But if you
Mm-hmm.
look at all your winning trades, how often are you going into drawdown on any of those winning trades? You're at least going $1 or $2 into drawdown. Most of the time, every time I spoke to someone, they're saying they're going at least $1 or $2 into drawdown. It's very unlikely they get in the trade and it just shoots up in their favor. By the
Yeah.
way, if that's you, then ignore everything I'm about to say here. If it just you get in and it goes straight, But if it doesn't, then like what you're actually better off doing, and again through terminal you can do this, is placing a scale order below price. So you're not paying up necessarily. You just wait
Mm-hmm.
for price to come back and fill you, and that requires a level of patience that you can only get really through reviewing your journal, because
Mm-hmm.
I know on every single one of my winning trades in the past, like it's going at least into drawdown by like $2-3 at a minimum, and that's like sometimes most of the time it's way more than that. So every single time, instead of chasing up, I should just place a limit $2-3
Mm-hmm.
below where I was about to execute. Sorry. So now I'm just actually it requires more patience, but the data shows me that I should be doing that, like factually.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just one way of doing it. I think there's so many other areas of execution that you can dive into in terms of like optimizing it, but that's just one way I found is just you go from paying market orders all the time to limit
Yeah.
chasing. Now I feel it's like, okay, limit scaling in just slightly, and it's just every single the three stages for me at least, market, limit chase, limit scale. I'm constantly just getting better execution,
Mm-hmm.
so that's the way I do it. But limit chase is still great, but just one thing I've noticed in my training is being patient and waiting for it to come back, because it's not necessary to always want to pay up necessarily. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Do you, when you use limit scale, do you distribute them all equally, or like
Yeah,
have a
I
skew
do them
in
equally.
price or size? I see.
I do them equally. Sometimes I won't even limit scale. I'll just place one single order below to get it in.
Hmm.
Um, because then it can get complicated if I'm getting like partial fills. Sometimes I just place one single order
Yeah,
and let that go. But yeah, I would evenly distribute if I was going to do that. Yeah.
I see. Interesting.
But
I'm
it's
always
interesting you say that. It's interesting you say that. Maybe I
yeah.
should be weighting the orders heavier to the lower side if I'm going long, for example, so that
Hmm.
I'm getting again a better fill. It really just really optimizing that amount and that how far do winning trades go against you, first.
Hmm.
And then that can give you like the best execution over time and optimizing for that. And I always go into this with people because I talk with like a few people that I trade with and we discuss, and some people that I teach or whatever. And some of them will be not, they don't, but they'll go, oh, why we focus on this small detail here? And I'm like, look,
Hmm.
at at the size I trade at the moment, this is important. If I laid this money on the table, it's actually a significant amount of money
Hmm.
that this very small detail can make. So I'd recommend it because these people probably also have some money that it's gonna play an impact. Honestly, at the end of the day, so yeah, that's what I would say. There, it's so important, and again, Insilico's helped me optimize the execution.
Hmm. Do you like run into size constraints with like your size or what you're doing when executing?
No, not yet. Um, I Because basically what happened was I would trade hyperliquid in the early days, like quite early
Hmm.
on, and I did then. And nowadays it's like not really. Um, Not necessarily, no. Especially because if I'm scaling in, and that's
Yeah.
something I didn't touch upon there, um, would be if I'm going to scale in, depends on like order book depth at the level I'm
Hmm.
trying to scale in. So this is like quite nuanced. But if I'm going to place one order, the book has to be thick. And if I'm
Hmm.
going to place like scattered order, scaled orders, the book's likely thinner. So I likely have no impact. But if the book is extremely thin, then like I'm doing the difference between one single order and like scaling orders. So
Hmm.
I didn't think we'd get into the nuances here, but this is interesting conversation. So yes.
No, I think with in usually in the podcast I talk about just generic trading stuff, but I think with you, it's interesting to go a bit into the weeds of like detailed execution,
Yeah.
because not just to like shield the terminal and whatever, but it's also just interesting because I think execution is so underlooked and undervalued
Oh,
as
it
an
is.
area in trading. I remember when I first started, like I'm doing a lot of scalping, and I've started out with that. And at the beginning, I just noticed like whatever I did, I just lost money because
Yeah.
I only marketed in and marketed out, and I couldn't really figure
Aye,
out
aye,
how
aye.
to do that in a better way. And it's just like you're paying so much money for basically no reason. And then I discovered limit chasing and like all the other features that the terminal has, and it's like no one really teaches that sort of stuff on how to
Mm,
optimally execute,
execute.
especially when there's like so little percentage wise moves that matter, and like the execution
I should
then
do a
really
video on
becomes
this.
important. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, I think
it
you should. Yeah,
optimizing execution because and especially it might be harder to do it on the podcast just because the visual is needed for this,
yeah.
but it's so important. I know someone that's literally only until like I spoke to them was wasting millions in dollars in fees this year alone.
Hmm.
Like in 1 year, they had wasted millions in fees alone. So that was interesting.
Hmm.
And it's out there. There's people out there, so I think it's important we mention it.
Yeah. Um, do you like you personally mentor people? Is it something you do?
Yes, I do. I have like a wait list type thing, and every now and then I'll go and I mainly do it because it keeps me on the ball with like mistakes I would have made in the past. Like I
Hmm.
see the amount of people I speak to who have made the mistakes in the past, either that I made, and they're doing it now, and it like refreshes it in my brain, and that's important. Problem solving with them is important too. seeing how other people's strategies work or don't work, that really helps me in my game. That
Yeah.
maybe they might not even realize that they're helping me out as well, but
Mm-hmm.
that's part of it, at the end of the day. And I really, really limit myself in doing that. Like, I probably have around 3 people that I do at the moment, maybe 4.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like very narrowed down, like just discussion and topics. So, I mean, if people are interested, they can apply. I don't want to promise anything, but there's a waitlist type thing. Maybe I comb through maybe like every 6 months. If there's interest, then yeah, go for it. But
Do they trade in a similar style to you or differently?
no, not all of them. Some are trading multiple assets, and it's about how they coming up with a system for that. They're trading multiple pairs, so you know they're trading multiple pairs. How do I come up with a system for that with them? They already have a system. A lot of them already, they've been watching my material, so they
Mm-hmm.
have like their own. They've built their own system. So it's like, okay, how can I help them optimize this? And it goes really well. Like
Mm-hmm.
it goes astronomically well because I've seen so many journals at this point. It's like it's second nature for me to like pick up on like these things that I see, and I'm like, okay, this is definitely
Mm-hmm.
something that can be improved here. Um, and always seeing the bright side of things, because I've been in the dark places in trading myself, and like
Mm-hmm.
sometimes you go speak with someone, they've had a bad period, and it's like picking them up to like an extent where like, look, you're not winning because you're not following your plan here. It's
Yeah.
not because your system isn't working. You just need to follow it, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's actually talking about really, you get into these conversations that you thought you wouldn't have over the internet. It's like quite deep. It's like, why aren't you
Mm-hmm.
following your plan? Right? Because if the plan's there and there's an edge there, and there's an edge there, why aren't you following it? What's going on? And it's breaking those like nuanced personal kind of issues people will have.
Mm-hmm.
What are you doing when you wake up and coming to the charts? What's distracting you? Time delay. The biggest probably learning that I've seen is like this constant re-entering of trades. This is like
Mm-hmm.
the most common thing that I've seen across every single person. Not every single person, but a lot of people. They'll get in, they'll get out, and then like you see the next trade above is like 10 seconds later or 20 seconds later they're back in, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, this is, and it's also a loser, and it's like constant. They're constantly doing it like 2-3 times, and it's like, if you're doing that 2-3 times, you should just stop yourself next time you're going to do this, and then be done with it for good.
So
And
it's
really,
basically like an instant revenge trade, or
yeah, it's an instant revenge trade essentially, and
mm-hmm.
like they're constantly into it again, and it's very, very common, very common. At least in people that have applied and that I've spoken with. So yeah, it's interesting. There's a lot there. That's like a very small part of it, but that's
Mm-hmm.
one thing again that I've noticed.
Are there any other things that are like very common with people usually that they do wrong that you've
Not
discovered that
wrong,
way?
okay, is that they definitely trade too much. I mean, it leads to that part. Is that
Mm-hmm.
every single person again has just trades too much, way too much. Taking. I know someone that was taking. What were they doing? They're doing maybe like 80, 100 trades, like I think every like week at some point. It's like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
this is way too much, and like the returns they're seeing are like not worth it one bit. And also, if you're doing that many trades, I'm not against it at all, but you got to properly review every single one, because every single
Mm-hmm.
professional who I've actually seen do that amount of trades to that type of frequency, like they're reviewing every single one diligently as well, and it requires that level of work. And if you're
Mm-hmm.
not willing to do that, like you need to scale this down drastically. Like there's no reason to be ever doing that many trades, and that's like the biggest thing. Sometimes it's not 80 to 100 a week or whatever, but it's a lot less. But it's still too many.
Mm-hmm.
Like most people are trading way too much. um so that's probably the second. Those two are quite very big.
What is your usual trade frequency in like a day or a week?
I probably at the moment I'm taking probably, actually last month November was 3 a week on average.
Mm-hmm.
12 trades total, so and averaged out to be 3 a week. Yeah. So, and it's like usually I'm not holding them over consecutive days.
Mm-hmm.
It's just I get in and I'm out over the course of the next few hours. But I would say last month I've taken like very slightly less. Probably it's more averaged out to like 4 a week. Yeah, 3-4 a week is probably where I'm at. at the moment.
I'm curious how, like, as you've come along in your journey as a trader and developed your system and are pretty much what you've set out to be, like a full-time trader that is into the profession. How has like your like outlook on trading changed, or like your outlook on life? How is your, like, what keeps you going? Where do you see yourself going in the future?
The honest answer with this, um, I don't know. I don't know. I
Hmm.
enjoy what I'm doing. Um, I enjoy making the money I'm making at the moment.
Hmm.
Uh, and I want to see how really far I can take myself in this kind of competitive sport that is trading to some extent.
Yeah.
How far can I really take myself? I don't know where I'll be in 10, 20 years. I think that's also extremely important, but I will keep pushing myself on that front. And for as long as I'm enjoying it, which you know, it doesn't seem to slow down, then,
Hmm.
I'm going to continue to do it. I think, I don't know if that was more of an extravagant answer to this, but what keeps me going is that I just enjoy waking up and doing it. Like, listen, I mean, there's times, in the past, I'm going to bed with my laptop on my chest.
Hmm.
Like that's what it was. I do 16-hour days for fun. Like just sitting down on the computer.
Hmm.
And even to this day, like that still exists in me. Like I still every hour, like I think about this. Of some stage, I'm thinking about this. If I'm out for dinner, I'm thinking about this. If I'm wherever I am, I'm thinking about this. Like that, it just doesn't stop, and I don't know what will make it stop. But
Hmm.
that's the way I am at the moment.
You're here forever.
I never forever, but I'm here for a long time. I
Yeah.
don't plan on being that. I think that's important. I mean, people have this. I want to touch upon this as well. People have this outlook on just being here for a 50x and leaving.
Hmm.
To my, as far as I know, I could be completely wrong on this. I very, 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 very rarely see that happen. Where you get 50x and you're done. First of all, where someone gets 50x to begin with, but where you get 50x and then you leave and stop doing it
Yeah,
there and
yeah,
then is
yeah.
like that doesn't exist. So that's also, having that longer term outlook is important to me. And with that, it's like I want to say to someone who's just looking to get into trading, like I always get asked, like, what are people looking for in terms of returns? And like,
Hmm.
if you can get, if someone out there in your audience is doing like 2-3 hour trades a month, 2 to 3 hour trades, in terms of like their performance a month, that's not bad. Obviously, there's room to be done on that. Like, I would recommend, there's no specific number, maybe 7-8 hours is like is really good work. But even if you're doing 2-3 hour a month, don't think you're being held back. That's probably the best place to be, because it just means if you're 2-3 hour more away from being like really, really up there.
Hmm.
All of a sudden you're doing 6 hour a month. Just an example. Um, and imagine you've averaged 6 hour a month for 12 months on end, right? That's then you're all of a sudden you're doing 72 hour a year. Um, I think my maths is right there. I could be wrong. No, 72 hour a year, I think.
How do you define that? Like, how do you
Yeah, that's the
what
R
does R
multi.
mean in this context? Yeah.
Yeah, so like how much you're risking versus getting on a trade, for example, right? But let's just, and that is obviously like that's a whole nother topic, because it's really dependent. How much you're risking per trade is based on the specific setup, what's its average expected value, that type of thing. Let's just go with, and this is never the case, by the way. God, you're ticking my brain. I've got so much to talk about here. If there's, let's just imagine every trade is 1%. You're risking 1%.
Hmm.
Most people will risk way more than this, by the way. But let's just say you're risking 1% and you're getting six
Yeah.
R a month. So you're getting 6% a month. Okay. And this is not the case because you're going to have varying risk. And I'll talk about that in a second. But you're doing 6% a month times 12, 72% a year. You're like, you're over the moon. Number one,
Hmm.
you're over the moon with that. People don't look at it ever like with that outlook. So, just go for small percentage gains to begin with and steady on. Now, what I would say here is that every single person out there, I completely agree with the fact that you should not be at your later stage in your career. You should be aiming to have varying risk in terms of like how much you're risking per trade.
Hmm.
But I think that message is shared across way too soon in most
Hmm.
people's careers, and they start risking different sizes on trades, they have no clue what the edge is on it, on anything.
Yeah.
What I'd recommend is actually starting with constant sizing and journaling that and finding which, what you need to size up on then. Like,
Hmm.
don't size up randomly, like size up in a controlled manner, like on a specific setup or specific, system. Like, don't, every single strategy you trade is going to have a different, expected value. Obviously, then size accordingly to that. But most people never get to the stage where they even test the strategy itself evenly to get a good
Hmm.
idea as to what they should be risking. So it's like risk constant, slowly build, identify, and then like diversify the risk. But most people jump way too soon into like diversifying their risk based on like ball tingling and stuff like that.
Hmm.
So I mean, that's what I'd recommend is going that route, and like go slower and steady if you want to be here for the long run. I personally really think that's the best way about it.
Hmm. Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. I think like position sizing is a very difficult thing, even if you're like an experienced trader. I just wanted to like say one more thing about what you said earlier.
Of course.
Like what keeps you motivated, and that you want to like just push yourself as far as possible. I recently listened to a podcast about there's a podcast called Acquired. Like they talk about companies and how they've built like the major companies that exist in the world nowadays. And they
Hmm.
did an episode about Berkshire Hathaway, so
Right.
about Warren Buffett.
Yeah.
It's like nine hour long 3-part series. But it really inspired me because they talked about how he really early on like realized the value of compounding,
Hmm.
and he like is a living example of actually doing that. Like he's 95 years old now. I think he just like wrote his last shareholder letter recently,
Yeah.
and obviously like investing is a little different than trading, but the same reasoning still applies because like he genuinely pushed that to the limit of like becoming one of the richest people in the world just by doing
Yeah.
that. And
Yeah.
so I can definitely relate to what you said there before.
Yeah, I would definitely say that this applies. The same theory applies to trading, and just having that longer term outlook on it.
Mm.
The word compounding. The word compound and compounding. They just have that long term outlook to things. They're not, you're not going to see compounding take effect in like a week, usually,
Mm.
or a day or a single trade. It is over a long period of time, and yeah, that's again, I completely agree with that.
Yeah, I think that's everything that I've wanted to
Yeah.
talk about so far. Do you have
Uh,
any closing words? Anything you would like to share?
um, focus on the long term. I mean, think about what your goals are first of all, everyone. I would say, um, and think about what you want to do. I mean, if you want to be here if you want to do this for a week, 50x and leave, maybe there's something out there that I'm missing. I don't
Hmm.
know. And there's people out there that can maybe go over and try that with you. But if you want to do this for a career, then take it slowly.
Hmm.
You know, look for reasonable gains and focus on the small details. I really appreciate you having me on. It's been great talking.
Yeah, thank you very much for coming on. I'm glad that we finally made it. I think this was a
Yeah,
good episode.
yeah,
Thank you.
awesome.